Bienvenue, benvenuti, and welcome to Expatriotical, the podcast for expats, travelers, and other adventurous souls. I'm Chandra, and after living as an expat with my husband and 4 children in 2 different countries for 6 years, I've learned the arts of pivoting during pitfalls, traveling tastefully for less, and soaking in amazing new cultures without losing your own. Join me as we dive into the joys and challenges of travel and the expat life in every episode. Hola, everyone, and buenos dias. Yes, I promise you are listening to the right podcast. This is still Expatriotical, but I also promised last week that I would talk about my recent trip with my family to Barcelona. And due to the fun nature of the city and the Spanish culture, we're going to do that a little bit differently. So I'm going to be more candid and definitely unscripted about this trip, sharing the ups and downs of the trip with you and the things that I absolutely loved. And I think the best way to do that is chronologically. So I have made out a post itinerary, if you will. It's what we already did. And I'm going to walk through it with you, and you're going to come on this journey of going to Barcelona. So starting off with, we got up at 3:45 in the morning to head to the airport to take the quick, I think it's about an hour and a half long flight from Paris CDG, or Charles de Gaulle Airport, to the Barcelona airport. And the plan was, and this is what we did, to also go to Andorra, which is a really small country that is kind of nestled in the Pyrenees Mountains between the country of France and the country of Spain. It was just a wonderful idea, I feel like, to check another country off of our bucket list of countries box. And so that's what we did. We rented a car, landed in the airport around 8:30 in the morning, and by 9 we had our car and we were on our way. We did, I will be honest, experience some car sickness because it wasn't a cold day, but there was sun. That was one of our only days of sun, which I'll talk about more about later, but it's windy and it's mountainous and it's beautiful. And we had a little bit of car sickness. Thankfully, nobody actually vomited, but it was definitely something that we had to kind of keep our eye on. But after about 2.5 hours of driving, we arrived, we found a parking lot, and as we were about to turn into said parking lot, this restaurant caught my eye and the eye of my daughter Lilia. And so it was lunchtime by that time, and we decided, you know what, let's go here. And we checked it out, and this place is going to be, we're not going to do traditional Shan selects this episode because I have a few different recommendations for you. So this is one place, and I will have the link for this in the show notes. It's called Cambalache, and it served some delicious food. And I highly recommend it. It's right there when you're on the highway. It's to your right. And the decor was amazing. I ended up taking, unfortunately, more pictures of the decor than I did the food. But they also serve amazing breads that we had that are homemade and made there. And you could see them preparing some fantastic looking desserts. And I was actually really upset because I did not get to try any, simply because the portions that they had given us were so big, I had no more room to eat dessert. So a high recommendation, and of we'll call them multiple Shan selects for this episode, that is the first one. So after we explored the town, we walked around, we let the kids play on multiple different playgrounds, and it was just a beautiful city, very clean, really lovely, and it was sunny, and we just really enjoyed the day. So we got in the car, drove back 2.5 hours, dropped the car off at the airport, although unfortunately when we routed that way we had some internet issues and we went through the city, so it took us extra long to get back. But we got back, we got a cab, which we could have taken the metro, or the metro and the train is wonderful there. The transportation is fantastic. We chose to take a taxi because of a time crunch to get to our Airbnb on time, because we would get charged a late fee. So we had a wonderful taxi driver. He was so friendly. He told us a lot about the city, told us things to expect, what to keep an eye out for. Fantastic. And got to our Airbnb accommodation, had a very thorough check-in. That's a whole other thing, and I'll explain more about the Airbnb later, but all was well. We slept in, woke up, had breakfast the next morning, and I sent the kids out to play because there was a little playground there. I will also touch on how much I love playgrounds in Barcelona later, but we had the kids play outside as I finished cleaning up and got ready, and then we headed in on the tram to the downtown part of Barcelona. And when we were waiting, or we had just stepped onto the tram, Caleb started complaining of having an earache. And we're like, oh, buddy, we're so sorry. Okay, we're on this. And, I tend to bring Tylenol or ibuprofen and also a thermometer. That's just years of having kids that end up having like a slight fever when you travel, usually when they were a lot younger, but I still have that habit. And he complained not once when we were still by the apartment and we had already left. So I had Tylenol, but as soon as we got to our stop, we exited and we saw the Sagrada Familia, which I'll talk more about in a minute, but we went straight to, he continued to complain. So then we went to a pharmacy and purchased some Tylenol or Doliprane. There's lots of names for it, but basically acetaminophen. And we purchased that for him. And then we went to find some lunch. We found a place right across the street from the Sagrada Familia, which for those that are listening to this that might not be familiar, is the huge and very interesting looking church that Barcelona has that is still under construction. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we went to a place called Eau Grove right across the street. Everybody chose something different. I loved what I had, which was more of like a chicken served over French fries, and it had like a sauce and peppers. It was so good. And a delicious glass of sangria. But during all of this, Caleb continued to complain and the acetaminophen was not kicking in. So Chris exited the restaurant and took him in search of an emergency room. Some of my American listeners might be asking, why an emergency room? Couldn't you just take him to urgent care? But I have yet to find an urgent care in Europe. That does not seem to be a thing. So off to the emergency room they went. And basically the rest of our day was spent with Chris trying to get that taken care of for the next I'd almost even say several hours. And then me taking the other children, walking around, exploring, trying to see things, because this was totally unplanned, of course. And we did get to see some fun things. I took them to see the Arc de Triomphe, which I'm sure it has a Spanish name, which I don't know, that's in Barcelona, which was really cool since we don't live crazy far from the Arc de Triomphe here in Paris. So that was really cool. We got to go down to some parks. We went to the beach. Isaiah got to help a guy in the park make these gigantic bubbles, which was so much fun. So it ended up being fine, but we were just separated. And Chris definitely had the harder job, if you will, sitting with a kid that was, by the time we met up with them, Caleb was feeling fine, but still hadn't been treated. But by about 7 o'clock in the evening, we finally reconnected. Caleb got his first dose of antibiotics, and then we headed back to our Airbnb. The next day, we went back to the same area. The area where the Sagrada Familia is kind of very much in the center of downtown Barcelona, and so it's a great spot to connect from. So we decided to purchase a bus tour and it's a 24-hour bus tour. So we had purchased it, goodness, I'd say around 1:30 in the afternoon, and so we did the red loop, which was to the south, and then we decided we would do the blue loop, the blue route, which was to the north. The thing about it was this was the worst purchase. This is, I would say, of all the things that we did, I would recommend not doing that. But before we got started, we had lunch at a place that was so delicious. This would be another Shan Select, if you will, and it was called La Guinda. And La Guinda had kind of a selection of tapas, but kind of not. I don't know exactly how to explain this to you. There was a kids menu, of course, so the kids chose from different things on the kids menu. Chris actually had like a tagliatelle pasta, and I wanted to go all Spanish. So I'm looking through their menu right now, and I do believe that I got the patacones rellenos, which were absolutely delicious. And then I got the tacos de cochinita pibil, and they were wonderful. And those were served like tapas. So the things that I got came in small portions, and they were heavenly. They were so, so good. Highly recommended them. And then a rosé or something like that to go with it. And it was a really lovely meal, and we really enjoyed it. We went on the bus tour, and I would say the thing that wasn't great about the bus tour is that compared to bus tours here in Paris or in London, there was very little information given. So we listened to a lot of music while we drove around these loops, but we didn't learn as much about Barcelona, and that was what was lacking and why. And it was also the most expensive purchase that we made of all the sightseeing that we did. So for me personally, because Barcelona has a fantastic public transportation system and is very walkable, this is not something that I would recommend doing, at least with the line that we went, which I believe is the only bus tour line that they have. I'm not positive about that, but it's the official one of the city. On Sunday, we started the day off with doing the Blue Line bus tour, which went to the north. And so we rode that, took a few stops, and then we decided we're going to use this to try to go to Mount Tibidabo. This is the part where I insert, if you are a Friends fan, you will be delighted with this story. We decided we wanted to climb this because Chris discovered that the episode where Joey tells Ross a story that helps him with the ladies, we'll say. And he starts out with, years ago when I was backpacking across Western Europe, I was just outside Barcelona, hiking in the foothills of Mount Tibidabo. And he didn't say it correctly. He gets corrected. Ross actually gets corrected later in the episode. So we were like, ooh, this mountain, let's go check it out. So the thing is that Mount Tibidabo is not crazy high. It really isn't. And we thought, we're going to do this. So we took the Blue Line up to the stop that was called Mount Tibidabo. Then we walked about another 20 minutes to take the train. We took the train up, I think, 2 or 3 stops to where you could get out and hike. On my phone, on my Apple, with Apple Maps, it said that it was a 15-minute hike to Mount Tibidabo. So I thought, oh yeah, that's no problem. But Chris pulled out his phone and said, well, my phone says it takes an hour and 15 minutes. Let's just say that Chris's phone was much closer to the appropriate time that it took. But we, other than one of my children, I will not say that child's name, most of us enjoyed this beautiful hike that kind of just zigzagged back and forth around the hill, up the mountain. We finally got to the top, and there were stunning views of the ocean, of Barcelona, of the Sagrada Familia. It was lovely. So we were there. There's actually an amusement park up there, and some of the rides were going. We didn't enjoy that part, but we did go inside of the gorgeous cathedral that's at the top. It's full of these absolutely amazing mosaics. It was beautiful. And then we enjoyed some lunch there. And then we rode the funicular down instead of hiking back down. But I will say this, that if you plan to hike up, you should maybe consider hiking down, because when I purchased the funicular ticket to go down, it was about 48 euro for all 6 of us. And then when I realized I had actually purchased a round trip ticket, and we found out later that they don't sell one-way tickets. So if you are going to hike up, be prepared to pay full price to ride down or go ahead and hike down as well. So we rode down the mountain, and it really doesn't even take you all the way down. It just takes you down the steepest part. And then we walked our way to catch a metro and went back to the area where our Airbnb was, and decided the sun was finally starting to come out. And we decided, you know what, let's let the kids go play in the sand. And we went and enjoyed the sunset and had a glass of wine on the beach. And it was really, really lovely. The next day was our big day where we woke up and we went to Park Güell, or Güell, I'm really not sure how to say it, which is the park that Antoni Gaudi designed. And apparently the park happened because it was initially going to be like a housing subdivision that nobody really bought into. And so they used that area to make this gorgeous park full of mosaics. And it was just really, really lovely. We saw the beautiful curved benches that are full of mosaics. That is one spot where there were a ton of people, but again, offering gorgeous views of the city. And it was really, really lovely to go see that. We probably spent an hour or so in the park, just kind of hiking around, looking at all of the different things. And it was very enjoyable experience. Then we had some time to kill because the tickets that we had purchased for the Sagrada Familia, our entry wasn't until 4:45 in the evening. So we finished up the time at the Park Güell, and then we started heading back down into the city because the park is not as high as Mount Tibidabo, but it is definitely on the northern side of the city, and it's kind of up on a hill. So we started walking down and we were talking about lunch, and I said I really wanted, while we were there, to have empanadas. And so we stopped and let the kids play at a park, and Lilia and I went in search of some empanadas, and we got some delicious empanadas, and we sat at the park and ate those, and the kids played, and we probably spent an hour and a half there. And it was just really lovely because it was our one sunny day. We had gone to Barcelona for sunshine, and we really only got one day of it because our first day was spent in Andorra, and that's where we had sunshine. But it was really lovely. Finished that there and then headed over to the Sagrada Familia. And now I'll take a minute to kind of talk about my experience there. So for those that are not familiar with what the Sagrada Familia is, it is the world's largest unfinished Catholic church. It began construction in 1882, and it is still ongoing. In fact, I won't see it finished in my lifetime. It's expected that maybe in 100 years it'll be finished. There are some issues, unfortunately, with a mayor. We did learn this little bit on the bus tour. A mayor in the 1950s thought this is never going to be finished and sold some of the property that the construction was supposed to go onto, and apartments have been built there. So now they are currently trying to buy the apartments from the families that live there so they can continue the construction. But when you walk to it, it has such a different feel than any other church that I've ever seen. And I remember when we got there, Chris asked me, do you want to go inside? And I said, I don't know. I want to see the outside first and then decide if I want to go inside. But the outside, because it's unlike any other church I've ever seen, in pictures, it just doesn't do it justice. But when you go there in person, I was so intrigued. I thought, oh yeah, I definitely want to see what he was trying to do on the inside. And let me just say that it is stunning. Also, the audio guides that we purchased were really good. Sometimes you get audio guides. I was just leaving a message for somebody recently and saying that I've had the audio guide at different places and they're not that great, but this one was excellent. And the kids were able to use it, no problems. And it was really wonderful. But just understanding the dedication and the humility of Antoni Gaudi is fantastic. So he started this knowing he'd never see it completely finished. He only ever got to see one facade, which is, the outside facing of it finished. And, when people asked, well, what do you feel about that? He said, my client, God, has all the time in the world. So he wasn't worried about that. Also, people asked him about, well, other people are going to have to continue the work. What do you feel about that? And he, of course, had all the plans laid out, but he said, instead of being maybe narcissistic about it, he said, oh, I think that their contributions will make it even more richer. And so it's really amazing. And you can see the genius, the depth of his love of what he was doing, his love of God. They say he was very devout in the building. And from the outside, I don't think you can see it as much as from the inside. When you go inside, it's stunning. I have never, and I don't say this to brag, but I've probably, because of living for 4 years in Italy and driving to little towns and deciding to go into the cathedrals there or the basilicas or the duomos or what have you, I've been to, I would guess, at least 50 different cathedrals in the past almost 7 years, probably more than that. And while the Duomo in all of her grandeur in Milano is still my favorite on the outside, still my favorite, the Sagrada Familia on the inside is my favorite. It is just, it's amazing. It's so beautiful. And not to sound really, I don't even know what the word would be, spiritual or what have you, but I've never been in a church where I had such an amazing experience. I kind of teared up a couple of times. The beauty there. And, they talk about how Antoni Gaudi was trying to introduce people of all cultures to have kind of an experience with God. And I definitely could see how he did that. He pointed all of his work up towards the heavens, if you will. And it was just an absolutely stunning experience. And I highly recommend that if you go to Barcelona, you have to see the Sagrada Familia, and you really, if you can, by any means, go inside, but book your tickets in advance, because we went obviously in the off season and we had to settle, if you will, for a 4:45 in the afternoon showing, and it closes shortly after that. So, or not showing, entry, and it closes shortly after that. So that's just a recommendation that you do that in advance. And then on Tuesday, the next day, Tuesday, we got up and were able to sleep in a little bit and make sure our apartment was spick and span, because we had to put a €300 security deposit down. And we'll just say I was really stressed out because I've never had to do that before. And we honestly didn't even get all of our deposit back because of the way dollars to euro transfer. But we made it out, and we had kind of a leisurely commute to the airport. And we stopped by this really cool park that had one of the largest slides I've ever seen in my life. Even Chris and I went down it, and it was really enjoyable. And then we took the train to the airport. In our time, somewhere mixed in there, we went and we did a Rick Steves walk of the area where there's tapas, and we stopped in and we did a tapas. I didn't have tapas, and neither did the kids. I wanted paella, and it was delicious and I loved it, but Chris had a blast choosing all these amazing different tapas delicacies, and it was a really good time. I will be honest that area isn't the nicest area of Barcelona, but we were safe. It just isn't the nicest area, and it was an interesting walk, and we did enjoy it. And overall, I want to give you my impressions of Barcelona. It's a lovely city. It's very clean. The people are friendly. The food was absolutely delicious. Loved all of the food. And one of my favorite things, and I've been told that this is not just in Barcelona, that this is in Madrid as well, but there were playgrounds on almost every block. And I really enjoy that. We live in an apartment and don't have a garden or a terrace or a balcony. And so our kids don't get to go outside as much. And there's lovely parks here, but they're not very close. So I can't just send my kids out to play because I don't want them to get hit by cars, especially my younger children. But this was amazing because these playgrounds were within each complex and some within a block. So you could literally send your kids out and see them from the window. And I just thought it was a very family-friendly, children-friendly city. And we really enjoyed it. And I would say that the only thing that could have been better was if we would have had more sunshine, or if we would have gone in the summer and could have played in the water and not just in the sand. But I had an absolutely lovely time in Barcelona. Highly recommend it. And along with this episode, there will be an itinerary that you can get on expatriotical.com when you click on store, and you can see all the things that we did. Hopefully, though, that gave you more of a visual, and you can use the PDF version to take with you on your trip. And now for our quote of the day. I thought that it would be befitting to try to quote the architect and designer of the highlight for me of the trip to Barcelona that my family and I took, Antoni Gaudi. And he said, "Tomorrow we will do beautiful things." And so he did. And so that continues in his honor. That's it for today, everybody. I hope that you have had an enjoyable time listening to this episode. I know it was a bit different. Let me know what you think. You can always email me at hello@expatriotical.com and tell me what you think. In fact, I had somebody recently reach out to me on Instagram. You can follow me there. And the hashtag is @expatriotical, and gave me an idea of a new episode. And I'm going to try to get that done as soon as possible. So love to hear from you all. Please reach out, say hello, whether that's on Instagram or via email. And I cannot wait to hear from you when you have a chance. I'll meet you all again back here next week. And until then, this is Chandra reminding you to live and travel in the know with Expatriotical.